Hi, welcome to the Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host, and today we're going to make this very simple router plane, very inexpensively I might add, and it is made from scrap wood, a thread insert and a thumb screw, and a well worn out Allen wrench. Now, if you want to help our channel out, you can buy these plans for 99 cents on our website, and the link will be in the description. So before we get started, please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps us out, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you. You will need a 1/4 by 20 screw insert, a matching 1/4 by 20 thumb screw, an old worn out Allen or hex wrench, and some scrap wood to make this project. The actual size you choose to make your router is up to you, and I have given the dimensions in the drawing to the upper left of what we did. Tom is now finding a center on the front face of piece A, and then he'll transfer that line also to the top face of piece A, using a square to make sure everything is square and lined up. Also transfer that center to piece B, just right at the top face and then at the front face. This assumes, of course, that you've already squared up the two pieces and cut them of equal length. Using your tri-square and a knife, clearly mark those center lines on both the top surface and the edge surface of piece B. Measure the length of the screw insert and mark that length along the top of the piece A at the center position. I have provided a drawing at the upper left to show this. All of these drawings will be available for a PDF download. In this video, Tom has actually moved on to step 7 instead of following the directions as I wrote them, because as I wrote them, he said it's probably superior to the way he did it, and he actually did it that way in the next video, which is just a watch along of a larger router plane. So he's simply tracing the pattern of the hex wrench onto the top of the surface of piece A as shown in the drawing at the lower right. And he's doing this by marking it with a knife around the outside edge of the hex wrench. Now, when you go to cut this, you're going to cut inside that line because you want this not to be larger than the hex wrench. You want it to be very snug and close to the size of the hex wrench. Or if you're using an Allen wrench, it's going to be square. Next, he's drilling the pilot hole in the front face of piece A at the center position to the depth of the screw insert. Here, he's doing it with just a hand drill, and we didn't want to go out to the shop and use the drill press because it was below 0 outside this day. So he's checking it with his tri-square to make sure he keeps it straight and level. Next, Tom is going to chisel out into the top of piece A the outline of the hex wrench, lining it up as I showed in the previous drawing. Now, in the future, you can do this after you glue the two pieces together, and that would work probably just as well, if not better. And remember, he's making the hole rather tight, so instead of cutting exactly on the outline, he's cut inside the lines that he scribed earlier. Tom is now just cleaning out the little bits of debris and ditzels from the hole, and he's going to test fit the wrench and make sure it fits in there snugly. Now remember, you're not going to want to make this plane with softwood. You need to make this plane out of hardwoods. Now Tom is drilling out a pilot hole into the front face of piece A at the center position to the depth of the screw insert. Next, drill out the actual hole for the screw insert now that you have a clean pilot hole. He's just using his hole centering and drilling jig to do this. You could do this with a drill press too. He's just cleaning out the bottom or base of that hole with the drill. Next, Tom is using a paddle bit to cut a visibility hole for the router plane. You could just use a hole saw if you had one, but if you don't have one, a paddle bit will work. We chose the paddle bit today because it was so cold outside and we didn't want to go out to the cold, dirty shop out in the barn to do this. So we stayed inside and used our trusty paddle bit on the drill. This is step 12 in the directions because after we built the second router, we decided that that was probably a better option to do it after the two pieces were glued together. Now, glue piece A to piece B as shown in the drawing and also in the video. Clamp and let this dry. Next, Tom is cutting a small groove in the bottom of the router plane so that the blade can be adjusted to cut a very shallow groove. See the diagram above to the left to show the exact placement of this groove. He's just using a simple chisel to cut this out. Tom had already cut through the top piece A for the hex wrench, or hex blade as it now has been converted to, for the router plane. At this point you can cut through piece B, or you can wait and cut through piece A and B together, which I think is what he does in the next video. Now Tom is turning the plane over so that he can refine that groove that he cut for the blade, now that the blade has been able to come all the way through the router. Tom is now just using a roller tape to trace some contour lines onto the surface of the router plane, just so he can round off the edges and make it pretty and fit the hands better. Next, he just draws some lines so he can cut vertically into those curves, and then he can chisel that away and then refine that to the amount of smoothness that he desires. After making a series of vertical cuts into the contour of that line, you can simply chisel away most of the waste. Use a plane to smooth it off to your desired smoothness, and then you can also take some draw shaves and smooth it further. At this point, we went out to the dirty shop in the barn and braved the cold, and Tom used his little belt sander to grind down the blade to the shape that it needs to be, which of course is squared off and flattened on the bottom side and squared off on the sides and also on the top. Notice how he keeps dipping it in cold water to keep the metal from becoming less hard, because it will lose its hardness if it just stays hot. So you have to keep cooling it down in between grinding. After grinding the Allen wrench or the hex wrench to the proper shape for a router plane blade, bring it inside and do a final sharpening using your sharpening stones. And then after that, to get it really sharp, you take it to a strope and strope it. Our next video is going to be a 3-sided strope, and so you'll want to stay tuned for that. Next, Tom actually takes it to the stones, and he uses the coarse stone first, followed by the medium and then the fine stones to get a very nice edge on this. And then he did strope it, but we did not show that in the video. Tom is now installing the threaded insert, and that is how the blade gets adjusted up and down. The screw or thumb screw gets inserted into the threaded insert, and then that puts pressure against the wrench, which allows one to adjust the blade up and down for the desired depth of a cut. Tom is now inserting the wrench, or I guess it's a blade now, into the router plane, and he's just showing us how it looks from a couple of different angles. There, so you can see you have like infinite adjustments on here for the depth. And to give the router plane a nice finish, he's just wiping on our 333, which of course is just 1/3 spar varnish, 1/3 mineral spirits, and 1/3 linseed oil. And we'll let that dry for a few hours before we test this out on a piece of wood. So the proof is in the pudding, as they say, and Tom is successfully able to use this router plane to clean up the bottom of a cut that he chisels, which is our usual way of using a router plane. We don't try to do the whole router groove or whatever we're doing without first chiseling it out. We just use it to simply smooth off the bottoms of a large cut like this. I just included this photo comparing the homemade router blade on the left to a commercial router blade on the right. You could use, of course, a much thicker and larger wrench. Thank you for watching.